Employers want AI-fluent workers, but most of them can't define what that actually means. Universities are so focused on preventing AI cheating, the students are reluctant to engage with it at all. How are people going to acquire the AI skills the future needs? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 786 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. AI skills are quickly becoming a baseline expectation in hiring, with more employers adding AI fluency to their job descriptions every month. Yet, when you ask those same employers what AI fluency actually looks like for the vast majority of roles that aren't deeply technical, most struggle to answer. Universities still treat AI primarily as a cheating problem, restricting how students use it rather than helping them to become fluent. So there's a growing gap between what the workplace demands and what education is delivering. So how do we define AI fluency in practical terms, and who should be leading that conversation? My guest this week is Kathleen Delansky, founder of the Education Design Lab. In our conversation, she shares what employers and students are revealing about AI readiness and why the current approach risks failing a generation of new talent. Hi, Kathleen, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Please, can you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Well, it's I'll shorten the story because I'm sort of in the twilight of my career. I was a journalist for many years, and I was also in the corporate world, most notably for this podcast in terms of relevance, as I was at the startup America Online in the 90s. So I rode that wave of teaching consumers how to use this new thing called the internet. But for the past 20 years, I've been in education reform and coming at how to prepare learners, particularly what we call new majority learners. So those who, don't have the access to all the social networks and maybe are first in their family to do schooling, introducing them to the world of work and training for careers. So that was a startup now. It's a national nonprofit called the Education Design Lab. So that's what led me to write this book that we'll talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about the book before we really dive into things.
Sure. The book is called provocatively On Purpose, Who Needs College Anymore? And it's really directed at two audiences. One is colleges who, in my view, are sort of stuck, many of whom are stuck in the maybe the year 2000 in thinking about how we need to prepare learners for this next generation of work. And secondly, it's aimed at families because so many folks are hearing the national narrative in this country, and I think in the UK and Europe as well, which is that you have to go to college or university to get a good job. And that is, has been stressing out so many families, in part, you could argue, causing a populist uprising of resentment about the technocrats and the wokeness that goes on, et cetera. And so what the book really explores, how do you get by without a degree? And is the world changing to the extent that people won't need them anymore? They won't be the only pathway to success.
I think that's really interesting. And I want to kind of zero in on, what's kind of happening at the moment, because the world of work is changing yet again with AI disrupting everything and threatening even more disruption in the future. I have talked to a lot of employers who talk about AI skills in the same way they used to talk about degrees. But what does that actually mean? From the conversations that you have, do you know what people are looking for? Do we know what AI skills actually are yet? What's the sort of situation at the moment?
Well, you've put your finger on one big part of the problem right now of why people say the hiring system is broken, because employers know that they are going to need an AI fluent workforce, but they don't really know how to ask for it specifically yet. I ran a little survey which does track with what the national surveys are saying of employers to ask, what are you asking right now for AI fluency or literacy skills, across the board for jobs? And about 50% of them said, yes, we are currently. And the other 50% said we probably will within the next 2 to 3 years. And so, that if that's not a validation that we need to figure out how to define AI literacy or fluency beyond the very technical specific jobs that where you're building large language models or you're, pushing the envelope on AI, but for everybody else who's, working in accounting or HR or sales or marketing, what do we need to be asking for as employers? I think that's just coming into focus.
I know you're actually running a course called How to Get Hired in the Age of AI. Tell us a little bit about that and how it's happening. And also, what are you learning from the students who are taking that in terms of how they think about AI? And what's really surprised you?
Yeah, it's been fascinating. It's like a research project with a group of students, and the university is in Virginia. For those who don't know it, it's a large public university, and a lot of these students are they know they're pretty clear about their major and the direction they want to go in a field. But the big surprise has been that even though they signed up for this class, it was an elective. Most of them have a lot of trepidation about AI, and they blame it on partly their colleges or universities, saying that we've been the AI usage has been restricted. We're held, we're kept away from it because they don't want us to use it to cheat, obviously. But as a result, we're not using it for anything, and we're not becoming fluent. We're not being taught how to use it for productivity and creativity and workflows. And so, some of them, super enterprising ones are figuring out on the side. But we took a survey across a lot of students at this one university, and basically, I would say 80% of them did not feel motivated or incented to learn how to become AI fluent. For the reason I mentioned, because they don't want to get in trouble, but also, there are the societal issues around the concerns, right, around policy or your brain turning to mush, privacy and then the environment. The students are very worried about that. So, when you add all that up, and some of them think it's just not going to be relevant in their field, which is, and we asked them their major, and they're wrong. I mean, they're just misinformed. And so I think, I describe it in my writing as a train wreck that we need to avoid, where, we're asking them increasingly as they come out of, as they start to apply for jobs, we're asking them to be AI fluent, but yet we're not in any way preparing them. In fact, we're, sort of keeping them at the gate of becoming proficient. So that's, that's probably the number one takeaway. And I would say the second takeaway has really been from employers to try to, because we're interviewing employers as part of this process and coming up with prototypes. We're doing a sort of a design thinking sprint. And the employers are really helping us kind of understand how they look at AI fluency. And what's clear is that they're just figuring it out. But we're starting to get a a sort of a trend line of some of the things that they want to see, which I could mention a few if you like.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, tell us a bit more.
Well, I think that they're really looking for applicants at any level to, get beyond the, sort of the prompting skills to being able to use AI tools to improve their workflows, to demonstrate efficiencies, and really also to use them as a sort of a demonstration of your creative problem solving skills. And then lastly, around creating work product, like, do you understand the difference between having AI spit out your press releases versus using AI to generate ideas for drafts, and sort of walking that line between having it help you generate versus generate instead of the human. It's and that's hard to how do you demonstrate all that on a resume? That's the part we're trying to figure out now, and I haven't heard very many good suggestions on that yet, but we're working through that. That's part of what we're working through in the class.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. There's so much interesting. There's so many interesting things about that. I mean, I think that the fact that the students are apprehensive, are nervous, these are the ones who've elected to take the course. So how do the other ones feel? I think that's the first thing. And also, I think it kind of reflects a lot of what I'm seeing in the education systems all over the world, really, that AI is still kind of seen as an enemy, and they haven't really adapted to the world that's emerging. I mean, do you think that's something that is going to take too long? Are universities and schools, are they looking at this seriously, or is it still being kind of shunted into a kind of a big box called cheating?
No, I think that they are waking up right now, and I think it was with this latest push of 2026 is just on hyperspeed, isn't it? Around the kind of headlines and improvements to the models that we're seeing, and the increased hype and additional economic reports coming out about the job outlook for graduates. So I think all these things are really bearing down to demand action at the university level. I'm going around doing some keynotes, in fact, this spring, that have just sprung up, and people are saying, come provoke us to help us take action. And in fact, just today, I saw a piece in the Inside Higher Ed, which is the kind of the college rag, if you will. It's the newspaper for colleges in the U.S. And we're talking about 5 ways you can integrate AI into your course level work, and conferences are talking about it. So I think it's very much on folks' minds that they have to. But in a survey that I saw last week at the Global Skills Conference here in D.C., which had universities from all over the world, they took a little survey of everyone, of all of us, to say, where are you, on the maturity index? And I think people, admitted to almost to a person that we were kind of on a scale of 1 to 5. We were kind of between 1 and 2 and, how well we're doing on this. So, but I think we can move quickly if we figure out the what.
We'll be back to the interview in just a second. Before we do, though, I want to tell you about HR Tech Europe, which is taking place on the 22nd and 23rd of April at the RAI in Amsterdam. It's an event designed with HR leaders, for HR leaders, bringing together our community to explore how technology is shaping the future of work. You'll hear from senior leaders at organisations like Cisco, Marriott, H&M and Pandora sharing what's working in practice. There are also smaller peer-based sessions, like the HR Tech Intensives, focused on working through challenges together. You can explore the agenda and sign up to attend at hrtechnologyeurope.com. That's hrtechnologyeurope.com. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Switching back to employers, and we've seen it a lot in the UK, and I know obviously in the US as well, that employers have in some cases dropped the requirement for degrees across the board, which used to be used as a sort of a strange kind of filter that didn't make much sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure that they've actually replaced it with anything, more meaningful in terms of how they're sort of assessing and choosing people. What's your kind of view on that, and what should they be looking for, and how do they find the talent that they need?
This is a key question right now. We are seeing in the US about 70 maybe percent of employers saying that they are no longer using degrees as the main filter. But I will say for those folks who do have degrees, it certainly can be, if you've got both experience and degree, you're even better off, right? But experience is king is the kind of the new buzz phrase. Like we used to say, talent is the new oil. Now we're saying experience is the new oil. And I feel like you're seeing that really show up in job descriptions. I sort of track job descriptions to see on this particular point. They used to say 4-year degree, master's preferred, right? And now they say 4-year degree or relevant experience.
Yeah.
And so then everyone's trying to figure out what is relevant experience. And it's particularly hard for people for entry level, right? Where you often see those job descriptions say 2 to 3 years experience. And yet, you're coming out of university or your training program. And how do you get that experience? So solving that chicken and egg issue has been part of my work. And the way folks are solving it is trying to push for more internships, more apprenticeships. You have in the UK a practice called sandwich degrees, where people get to spend like a year in industry in the middle of their degree. Those are wonderful models. Very hard to get employers to sign up to offer slots for those models, but that is one of the things we're trying to do. But the other thing I would say is that in the age of AI, I think there's a kind of a critical mass around the idea that we've always talked about, but now we actually mean it, which is that critical, the human skills are the most important, and the expression of those human skills in the context of managing the bots is really kind of coming into focus. What do those skills look like, and how do you measure them as an employer? Looking at candidates, I think is also a really rich area of work right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a big topic for us on the podcast. I mean, what's your view on it? How do you think, employers should be approaching that particular issue?
Yeah, well, my organization, the Education Design Lab, has been defining and trying to credential human skills for about a decade. And I would say, I would give us a B-. We haven't gotten there yet. We've been very good at creating the frameworks and breaking down the human skills, such as critical thinking, collaboration, creative problem solving, empathy. We've been very good at defining the subcategories, which I think has been very helpful to educators around the world that have used our framework to think about how to assess these human skills. But we've also actually created assessments, which I think are good. But the problem with assessments is that they need to be universally accepted by employers to have any meaning beyond your university or your college. And so I've been on a kind of a quest to try to push sector organizations, like a SHRM, Society for Human Resource Managers, or even accounting organizations, or whatever the nursing associations, to basically pick a winner of assessments that would be universally recognized in the same way that we already have very successfully for a lot of technical skills. And we need those accepted assessments for human skills. I think that's kind of the next horizon that we need to summit.
That makes a lot of sense. And for the talent acquisition sort of leaders and professionals listening who really want to think about this whole topic differently, what would your advice be to them in terms of, starting to sort of view entry-level talent through a different lens?
With respect to AI, I think the most important thing to do right now, because we're in the eye of the cyclone, but the most important thing to do right now is to define what your organization means by AI literacy or AI fluency, and add it as a boilerplate to job descriptions, knowing that you need to revisit it every few months because this is all moving so fast. But that's a good internal practice anyway, to push the organization to think about how you define skill, master your skill competency, or what's needed for this job or that job. Because, that generally has been the biggest problem for those of us on the outside trying to prepare, the future workers for, various sectors, is trying to game or guess what mastery or sufficiency in skills looks like for the employer. Because when you ask them, which is part of the work that we do at the lab, they often don't know, and they're very pleased to have the conversation because they haven't thought about it in that way. Like how would you assess it at entry? They know maybe what it looks like to get promoted, to justify a promotion to another job, but what level? Lots of times, and I'm guilty of this too. I hire people when I put together a job description. I'm just sort of like imagining my unicorn, right?
Yeah.
We're all doing that, and in the age of AI, that's getting pretty. The unicorn is pretty murky. I think because we're all getting inundated with resumes that all look the same, and many of us are having to use the bots to screen, those resumes. Think of a way that the enterprising applicant can break through, like a question in the fine print that invites them maybe to send something to another email box that is an expression of their creativity or their usage of AI, or something that is almost like a back door, because you see a lot of employers starting to do that, is creating back doors to the resume because people argue the resume is broken and AI is part of the reason.
No, absolutely. As a final question to kind of bring this all together, what do you hope the future will look like in terms of, hiring and AI literacy? What are we likely to be in for in a sort of a few years' time? And what needs to change between now and then?
I think that, building on this point that the resume might be dead, I mean, that's obviously a dramatic statement, and we'll need something, some way that people send in their application. But I would be excited if people could have ways to express their talent or their potential to employers that are not on a piece of paper that goes through either a human or a bot screener, because it's becoming less and less useful to employers, I think. And you see some interesting models. And so the question would be, how can we scale those models? I'll give maybe one or two examples. KPMG, the consulting firm, has announced an internship program where their internship program is focusing on both building and screening for human skills. And I thought that was very interesting. It's running this spring. And the idea that you could, rent to buy by bringing folks in. Of course, then you've got to screen to get into the internship program. But let's call it lower stakes ways for school-based interface with employers. Like, how can you meet employers earlier so that you could, show your stuff? I mean, I'm an employer and I'm teaching this class and I'm really getting to know, my 20 students, and it's been fascinating. Employers don't have time to do that, but there are organizations like Ripen, RIIPEN, and others, Podium, who are creating platforms to match employers with college or training level talent. And they give them projects that they can sort of show their stuff before the cliff of graduation, and then, sending your resume into the void. I'm just trying to think of ways that we could not have the hiring process be a cliff, because that's what it feels like right now for a lot of entry-level talent.
Oh, I bet. Kathleen, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Matt. It was an interesting conversation.
My thanks to Kathleen. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.